friends. Thanks for tuning in. This is Sarah Wrightsman with the Creative Guts podcast. I'm coming at you from quarantine during the great coronavirus pandemic of 2020. I'm coming at you today with a little cross-stitch tutorial. So let's grab our supplies and get stitching. Okay, let's get started by talking about the supplies that you'll need. So to start, you're going to need a piece of fabric. What we recommend for cross stitch is called Aida. This is the fabric that cross stitchers typically use. This one's a 14 count Aida and in off-white color. 14 count just means that there are 14 stitches per inch. You can choose whatever color you want. There are hundreds of them. You also need a hoop to go with your fabric. This is a 4-inch hoop. This will work pretty well for our pattern. You'll need 2 skeins of floss, so we call it floss in embroidery, not thread. These are 2 skeins of floss. I chose DMC 351 and DMC 518. Again, you can choose whatever color you want. So pick 2 floss colors and an Aida color that you think are going to go well together. You'll also need a needle. This is a rounded tip tapestry needle in a size 24. That's good for cross stitch and good for beginners. This little doodad is just it's called a needle minder. It is just a little magnet thing that holds your needle on your fabric when you're not using it. It's totally unnecessary, but also really fun if you're into cross stitch and end up doing it a lot. Buy a needle mender, they're really cool, or make one. And lastly, you'll need a pair of scissors. They don't have to be fancy stork scissors. They can be any scissors to cut your floss with. So most importantly, you're going to need a pattern to work with, and we're going to be using my New Hampshire pattern. So I called this pattern I Heart New Hampshire, and you can see I did this one. This is what our end product will look like. I did this one using an ice blue Aida and a gray and red floss colors. So you can pick whatever colors work for you. Just make sure that they go well together. And that's all you need. Okay, once you have your supplies, it's time to get stitching. So I printed out the pattern. This pattern is available on the Creative Guts Facebook page. You can find a link to it in our posts. So it's facebook.com/creativegutspodcast. We have all of our other supplies ready to go. So we're going to start by prepping our fabric. The first thing you want to do is find the middle. So this fabric is cut to 6 inches by 7 inches. And the reason I cut it to that size is because our pattern is about 3 by 2 inches or so. And you want your piece of fabric to be a couple inches bigger than your pattern on every side. So the first thing we're going to do is find the center of the pattern. The center of the fabric rather. So I just fold it into quarters and then figure out some way to mark the middle. So you can stick your needle through it. You can, mark it with a washable fabric marker if you have one. You can put a little piece of floss through there. One way or another, I like the needle trick to just kind of remember where your center is so that you can put your center right in the middle of our hoop. So you're gonna unscrew the top of the hoop, pull the 2 pieces apart. You want to stick this underneath there so that your center is roughly in the center. And we're just going to smush this down. Takes a little force, and then screw this back on, sort of pulling your fabric taut as you do this. Okay. That's great. And so our middle is in the middle. We know that. I'm going to stick my little needle minder on there. Hold my needle when I'm not using it. Okay, so we have our fabric ready to go. Let's set that aside. Now we need some floss. So we're going to start with this blue color because we're going to start with the outside. I'm going to use this pinkish color for the heart. So some people, go through the trouble of bobbinating their floss, and you can totally do that, figure out some way to do it. I like to just slide my little thing down and then pull this out. And the shorter the length you do, the easier it is to control, but also the more often you're going to have to cut it. So I like to do about 1 foot or so. We're going to cut that. Now, the tricky thing about embroidery floss is that it comes in strands of 6. So this is actually 6 strands of embroidery floss, and we're going to use 2 for this pattern. 2 is incredibly common. If you like a little fuller coverage, then you can do 3. I usually only see 1 for, say, like backstitch, and I've personally never used more than 3 strands. So now we have 2 strands of this embroidery floss. We can grab our needle and thread that. Okay, so now that you have all your supplies and everything's prepped and ready to go, it's time to get stitching. So in the interim, I grabbed a colored pencil. This is helpful for marking where you are on your pattern, and I also grabbed a second lamp. So unless you have really amazing vision, you really do need a lot of light for cross stitch so you can see these little holes and see what you're doing. So the first thing we're going to do, we have our needle threaded, so you're going to find roughly the center of the pattern. So these little arrows help you identify what the center of the pattern is. If you line up the center of the pattern to the center of the fabric, then you'll never run out of space while you're stitching. So somewhere right around here. So I'm going to start on this row. Now this row is about 16 across, so it's called counted cross stitch because you really are counting as you go. So we're going to start, so we can start at the edge of the pattern, slightly off center, and I'm going to show you how to get started. So we know center's here, let's start slightly off center. Let's go in through this hole. So you're going to go in through the back of your hoop. You're going to hold down a little tail over here, and by the way, you don't tie embroidery floss, and as somebody with a background of sewing, this really got me for a while, but you don't tie your floss off. So I have a little tail on this side, I have a little tail on this side, and you just figure out ways to sort of manipulate. So I hold my needle down at the very end so I can hold on to this tail and not lose it. So what you're going to do is literally, cross stitch is literally making crosses, so you're going to make little X's. So you go in at a diagonal, so you have a little diagonal stitch right there. On this side, you're going to hold down your little tail so that you can stitch directly over it. This keeps your back really neat, which makes it easier to work with. So you're going straight up and down on the back side. Try not to catch the corners of your fabric, that's a pain in the butt. Straight up and down on the back side, diagonal on the front side. So we're going to go diagonal. And we're doing 16. So this is 3. When we get to the end of this row, we're going to double back and finish our X's. So now that we're at the end of our row, what we're going to do, so go back in, we're going to double back, and we're going to finish our X's. So make sure you're always doing your stitches in the same direction. It's going to make your pattern look neater overall. So we're going to do the whole row this way, and then the whole row that way, and we're going to do the entire state of New Hampshire going in the same direction. Run out of floss and you want to tie off your end, we're going to do it basically the same way that we started it. We're not going to do it right now because we have plenty of floss left, but what you're going to do is take your needle and double back through underneath your stitches to lock down the other tail. So we sort of start and stop our cross stitches in the same way by locking in that tail underneath the vertical loops. Alright, so we finished our first row. This is cross stitching, easy peasy. So now what we're going to do is go down to the next roll. It is the same amount of threads, so we're going to do another 16. Okay, so I'm gonna leave you to keep stitching, and I'm gonna check in when we get closer to the end of our pattern. Okay, cross stitch is a marathon, not a sprint. So I have a couple more stitches left to go before I wrap this up. I saved the heart for last. So let's finish this up. Okay, and as promised, I'm going to show you how to tie this off. So you take your needle and you shove it underneath some of these vertical stitches to lock down your thread. This takes a little bit of force. I'll pull my needle through. There we go. Trim this off. And we're all done. So ordinarily, to finish off your cross stitch, what you're going to want to do is take it out. You can give it a rinse, get the oils from your fingers off of your finished product. It'll help it last longer. I sometimes just skip that step. That's okay too. We moved our hoop around a lot while we were stitching, so it does help to give it just a spritz and iron it. Always iron the backside to prevent your stitches from going flat. And then if you want to finish it in a frame, you can. If you want to just leave it in your hoop, you can. I tend to leave them in my hoop and just trim the edges. And once you get really good at this and get a hang of it, you can do some really fun stuff with colors. So I've done some gradient patterns. You're welcome to my patterns anytime. I don't sell them. I don't have any interest in making a profit off of pattern making. So if you ever want them, just reach out. And if you have any questions and you start stitching this week, Creative Guts is hosting a virtual meet and make, and I will be there and I will be stitching. If there's anything you want to sort of run by me or learn how to make, then, meet us there.